So that's the kind of the politics and the personalities, but the kind of $1.6 trillion elephant in the room, I hate that phrase, I don't believe I just said it, but anyway, is the economy. And the Australian economy is at a juncture now that this is as important a juncture as we've seen since the financial crisis. And for me, I kind of detected a real note of panic in the RBA's cutting of rates last week, and the week before, and then their comments about the state of the economy. The Australian dollar is currently in the mid 70-cent range compared to $1.10 when Wayne Swan was Treasurer. Was anyone here that night I did a thing with Wayne Swan? No? All right, never mind. But Swanee and I were here and talking about his book. And he talked a lot, because a lot of that book by Wayne Swan is about the financial crisis. But one of the things that kind of came on after that and made it enormously difficult and challenging as a treasurer for Wayne Swan was the bloody Australian dollar was worth US $1.08, $1.09, $1.10. And it's enormously difficult to get an economy going and to get a budget in balance when the Australian dollar is so high. Joe Hockey is in the lucky position that he's got a dollar that's below 80 cents. And that is an enormously sort of stimulatory component to the economy. Really good if you're a manufacturer, if you're an exporter, or you compete with imports. Joe Hockey is actually running a highly stimulatory fiscal policy. This is how bad this government is at communicating. Joe Hockey is pumping tens of billions of dollars into the Australian economy. He is running a stimulatory fiscal policy, every bit as stimulatory as the one that Labor ran, and yet everyone thinks he's Captain Austerity and he's a slash and burner. And that's a small indication of just how bad this government's been at getting its message across to voters. So the dollar's down low. There's an enormously stimulatory fiscal policy. Interest rates are already at historic lows. So there's all these good things going for the economy, and the Reserve Bank has thought, bloody hell, we need to cut interest rates again, and they're probably going to have to cut them still more in order to kind of try and provide some stimulus to the economy. And this is going to be one of the big challenges of 2015 for anyone in government, because the Reserve Bank thought that we were going to return to trend growth toward the end of this year, and now they've put that back. As far as they're concerned, we're not returning to trend growth until maybe later 2016. Unemployment's going to stay high. Growth is going to be is going to be tepid. What went wrong? Because last quarter of 2013, first quarter of 2014, 0.8% growth. 2 quarters, 0.8% growth. That's trend growth for the Australian economy. So there was this kind of surge of confidence into the Australian economy after the coalition was elected. 2 quarters of strong growth, then bang, what happened? The budget. The budget came in and was so poorly put together and so poorly sold that it smashed consumer confidence. Between the budget and then the government's ineptitude afterwards, it smashed consumer confidence. And the government, this constant stumbles and ineptitude from the government affected not just consumer confidence but business confidence as well. And by the end of the year, the economy was flatlining. That's why we've ended up with a situation where the Reserve Bank has felt the need to inject yet more stimulus into an economy that is already being, it's being supercharged fiscally and in terms of monetary policy. So that means that in addition to there being an economic problem, which affects the real world, affects people's jobs, affects people's ability to repay mortgages, if you lose your job, there's all sorts of flow-on consequences for that. There's obviously a fiscal problem as well. And this is the government that insists that surpluses are in its DNA. Joe Hockey said he was going to deliver a surplus in his first year as Treasurer, and then every year after that Labor was utterly incompetent, that they had a spending problem, not a revenue problem. So I can remember all these quotes from Joe Hockey saying about basically how as soon as he got elected Treasurer, bang, everything was going to be fine. And sadly it hasn't worked out that way. When Joe and Matthias Cormann, who I've got a lot of time for, presented the mid-year economic forecast at the end of 2013, they made a point of saying, right, we're ruling a line under the long years of Labor's overstatement of revenue. This is the problem that kept besetting Wayne Swan, is Treasury would go, right, but you're going to get 320 million bucks worth of tax revenue this year. When they finally total up at the year end, they only got 305. Constant problem. Wayne was always having to write down revenue and having to reduce spending. And Matthias and Joe said, what, at the press club, they said, what, that's the end of that. From now on, all the forecasts are going to be spot on. They actually said that. Well, I didn't say exactly that, but they said words to that effect. And what's happened since then? Well, 2 times since then they've had to write down revenue, and not just by $1 or $2 million, $1 billion, but by a lot of money. And they've continued this debt and deficits narrative. They've continued this argument that they're fixing up Labor's mess, while their deficit has gone up and up and up. And the funny thing is, this year Joe Hockey is booking more revenue as a proportion of GDP than Labor has over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, one year, I think it was 2011-12, Labor booked 19.9% of GDP in tax revenue. This year Joe is planning to take 22% of GDP in revenue. And yet his deficit is still, in the tens of billions of dollars range. So the low iron ore prices obviously contributed to that. It's not just Joe's impact on confidence. The low iron ore price, low coal price, low oil price as well. That's going to feed through into the prices we get for natural gas. All means that that Joe's got a big revenue problem, which in turn flows back to the government's plans, or Tony Abbott's plans for how he's going to recover, because he is going to have to pitch a big family assistance package to Australian voters at the same time as the budget deficit is blowing out again. And it makes for a very difficult kind of set of messages. I mean, the government's messages were already mixed enough, but all of a sudden they've got this additional thing of, they keep saying, well, surpluses are in our DNA, and in fact it looks like deficits are kind of in their bone marrow every bit as much.